is reforming our tax system. And I want to explain basically why we think that that's really important for us. First off is just competition. We have arguably the worst tax system in the industrialized world. What I mean when I say that is companies and countries compete on a global scale in this 21st century economy. We all know that. It's a global economy. Problem is we haven't reformed our tax system since the year I got my driver's license, 1986. And that's a great ringtone, whoever has that, by the way. Well, that's not even a ringtone. That's pretty cool. Interesting. Yeah. So what I was saying is we haven't reformed our tax system since 1986. When we did it in 1986, we tripped off sort of a worldwide competition based on tax policies. It sounds like crickets, doesn't it? Yeah, I didn't mean to inspire that. And here's our issue. Right now, we tax companies like this at 35%. That's about 20% of American businesses. 80% of American businesses, many of your suppliers, probably some of your contractors here, they pay their taxes as individuals. We call them pass-throughs, like subchapter S corporations or LLCs. Their top effective tax rate is 44.6%. So our competitors to the north, I come from Wisconsin, our competitors from the north, Canada, they tax their businesses at 15%. Ireland, you have a lot of Irish here, 12.5%. Technology tax rate on companies, I was just informed this morning, in Israel, 6%. China, 25%, but they actually give you a break in the early years. We're between 35 and 45% on how we tax American businesses. And so one of the big, great problems we have is we're basically taxing American businesses out of America. We're making it really hard for American businesses to compete and succeed in the global economy because of our tax system. What's worse is if we are successful, like Intel clearly is, in being a global company, in making money by selling goods and services overseas, they can't bring those profits back into this country and reinvest it in jobs in manufacturing in America for many reasons, but chief among them is because of our tax code. So we have $2 to $3 trillion of American profits parked overseas that can't come back to be reinvested in our communities because of our tax laws. So we got to get these tax rates down. The average tax rate on companies in the world is 22.5%. And when we're taxing American businesses 35 to 45%, that makes us very, very uncompetitive. And so we are convinced that if we get our tax rates down on all of our businesses, small businesses, big, and everything in between, that we can be far more globally competitive, and we can make it make more sense to keep our companies based in America. What does that mean? That means our headquarters stay here. And when our headquarters stay here, that means the affinity and the attachment to the community stays here. That means the Boys and Girls Club gets more funding. That means United Way and local churches and charities get more community support like clearly you do here in Portland. And so there are lots of reasons why we want to make sure that American companies stay America, but we also want American companies to be able to make things here and export them all around the world. And one of the things we think we also ought to do in tax reform is create incentives for businesses to expand more plant and equipment. You spend $10 billion a year on capital equipment, building these clean room factories. You spend $12.7 billion a year on R&D. So clearly, we think it's important that more of that occurs here in this country so that we can make things here, have great jobs here, and export them all around the world and be globally competitive. And so that is what we're trying to achieve when we talk about tax reform with respect to competition. Another thing is fairness. And this is what I want to talk to you just as people, as families, as workers. We don't really have a system that is very fair. And one of the reasons why our system is not very fair is because it's really complicated. You can sit next to your next door neighbor, have the same kind of income, and pay dramatically different taxes because of all the different carve-outs and loopholes in the tax code. So we want to clean this thing up. We want to clean up our tax system to make it simple and fair, condense all these redundant loopholes, get rid of a lot of these sort of bizarre special interest carve-outs, and just lower people's tax rates. Cut people's taxes, lower people's tax rates. The philosophy in the tax code in Washington today is send your money to Washington, and then if you do what we approve of, we'll let you keep some of it back. That's ridiculous. It's paternalistic. It's actually kind of condescending. What we want to do is just clean this system up, simplify it so much that you can fill out your taxes on a postcard so that you don't have to go hire an accountant to do your taxes. You don't have to stress what's tax day going to look like. I mean, how many of you kind of sort of dread April 15th because you really don't know what the heck to expect, right? This shouldn't be a dreaded thing. This should be something where you know what's going to happen, it's predictable, and it's simple, and it's fair. And so we think for families, for workers, for businesses, that's going to be really, really important to clean this mess up and simplify it so people can easily comply with our tax system. The last part I would say is this. We haven't had growth in this economy near what we used to have since before this great last recession we had in 2008. What I mean when I say that is, in the old days as in like 10 years ago, our trend growth rate was 3% plus. We've been growing between 1% and 2% in this economy. Now that doesn't sound like a whole lot just thinking about it. 1.2% economic growth rate versus a 3.2% growth rate. It's massive. It's enormous. If we can get our economy growing at 3+%, that means workers have more take-home pay. That means we have higher standard of living. That means we are creating more jobs. That means there's more confidence in our economy so that boardrooms and business leaders are actually saying more expansion, build more, do more. That means the next disruptive technology that's right around the corner, maybe in someone's garage, is more likely to actually occur and get funded in this country. That's why we want to have faster economic growth, because what it does is it raises wages, it increases take-home pay, it produces more economic security, and most of all, it just gets our economy growing. It gets our economy healthier. So we really think that in order to have a healthier economy, where people can have good paying jobs, where we can keep businesses in America, where we can make more things, where people up and down can have good family supporting paying jobs, we have to have tax reform. So that is one of the biggest achievements we are hoping to achieve this year. We feel very confident about this. The reason we feel confident about achieving tax reform is it's just high time. Everybody agrees. It hasn't been since 1986 we've reformed this thing. Our current tax code is a junker. It is a jalopy. I mean, it is the pre-drone era. It is really something. And the rest of the world's caught up and surpassed us. So it's high time, in spite of the drags we've had on the tax code, we fix this. And I really believe companies like Intel and others will be really wired for even more impressive growth. And that's what's exciting about this. You turn on the TV and it's not a pretty sight to see these days, because there's so many things that are happening that are frustrating. There are so many anxiety moments, whether it's foreign policy challenges or just the acrimony we have in politics these days. But if we can get some of the basics right, if we can fix some of these sort of core structural problems that most of us agree need to be fixed, we can really sort of rebuild some confidence in our country and in our economy. And that is what we're trying to achieve here. So I just want to say, just on behalf of myself and Greg Walden, I want to mention one thing. We've got Greg Walden here, who represents the part of Oregon on the other side of the mountains. Is that how I basically describe it, Greg? Greg, you're very lucky to have Greg Walden. You know why? He's the chairman of the Commerce Committee. This is the committee that is in charge of a lot of the laws that affect companies like Intel. This is the committee that's in charge of a lot of the laws that affect things like autonomous vehicles and the future of commerce and spectrum and the rest. So you're very, very well served and very fortunate to have such an effective, well-known, high-ranking member of Congress who is at the cutting edge of writing these technology laws that will make a big difference. I come from a different committee, the Ways and Means Committee. That's the committee in charge of our tax laws. So what we're trying to achieve here is to get the American economy primed for the 21st century to be competitive, to make laws that make sure that we can get out of the way and allow entrepreneurs and technology leaders to flourish and survive and compete and thrive. And when we do that, we believe this is going to create a momentum of economic growth and upward mobility for everybody. What we ultimately want to do is get people out of poverty, into the workforce, and get good family supporting jobs. What we ultimately want to do is to give people basically a confident America, so that they're confident in their country, they're confident in their future, they're confident in what lies ahead for themselves and their kids and their grandkids. And that's basically why we're in public service doing what we're trying to do. And I'm just very inspired when I come to a place like this at Intel to see what you do. The last point I'll say is, this is just raw competition. We were just talking about this, and I'm not going to repeat this Gaelic phrase because I won't be able to do it, but Ann was telling me, Ann Kelleher from south of where I'm from. She's from Cork. My family's from Kilkenny. This is where we're all from in Ireland. She was telling me Each factory you have here, you have 50,000 employees in America. Each factory, you actually would save $2 billion over 10 years in taxes if you move these factories to other countries. Think about that for a second. Think about the need to be competitive and the fact that we are shooting ourselves in the foot in America when we are basically telling great companies in America, you're better off, especially with taxes, to the tune of billions of dollars if you just make things overseas. This is wrong, and this is why, among many, many reasons, we've got to reform our tax system so we don't make you face these difficult dilemmas, whether we stay in America, make it in America, produce jobs in America. We want the tax system to incentivize, reward, and encourage, and not discourage such behavior. And so that is basically why we're here, to learn and listen to what you do. And I just want to say thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Anybody got any ideas or questions or thoughts? That's the chilling effect when I say that always. But I want to give people the opportunity if you have any comments or questions. Yeah.
I have a question about immigration and its impacts on how we do business here too. What kind of immigration reform can we expect going forward?
Yeah.
And how that impacts?
Where's Duffy? He and I were talking about this a minute ago. So we think, I've long believed that I think the idea of going to a merit-based immigration system that is set for skills and jobs is a smart thing for our country. What that means is, when we see gaps in the labor market, whether it's, especially here for high-skilled, high-tech, PhD engineers, we should have more of those kinds of visas so that we can make sure our economy gets the talent and the tools and the labor it needs to be able to maximize its performance and growth. As Speaker of the House, I don't co-sponsor bills. When I did, before I co-sponsored this thing called the Staple Act, we got that idea from a guy named Andy Grove. You ever heard of him? Yeah. So that phrase was from Andy Grove back in the day. I got to meet him when I was a young staffer back when I worked for Jack Kemp. And in all those days, we've always believed, especially with baby boomers retiring, especially with the fact that we're increasing our retirement population by about 90% in America, but only increasing our working population by about 19%. So we have a real demographic crunch on the horizon, and we have to deal with that. The first way of dealing with this is getting able-bodied Americans from poverty into the workforce, making sure that our welfare safety net system always encourages work and pulls people into the workforce. We passed a very comprehensive overhaul of career and technical education about 2 months ago in the House. I'm confident that bill is going to pass the Senate so we can close that skills gap. But even after we do all of that, even after we make sure we get every able-bodied American into the workforce in good jobs with good careers, we're still going to have shortages. We're still going to have tight problems. Wisconsin, we need people to milk dairy cows. Here, you could use probably a few more tech engineers to help you, build solve these problems you have. So I really do believe that an immigration system that is wired for that is based on what the economy needs, based on skills, based on contribution to the economy, is the kind of system that I believe an emerging consensus is occurring that we hope to achieve. At the same time, we have to make sure that we enforce our laws. That is why there's a lot of talk about the border. Put the politics aside. For any country wants to be able to secure its borders and be able to control who comes and who goes, just for national security reasons. And so that's also very important that we achieve that as well. All right, I guess that's it. Everybody's shy. I understand. When these TV cameras are in, it does that to people. So thank you very much. I want to say, I hope you're all Packer fans. If you're not, okay, there are a couple of them here, though. If you're not, we all love Russell Wilson, and I know he's just up the street. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.